Hello everyone and welcome to NerdGoblinart. I'm Lula.
And I'm Martyn.
And today is a collaboration with Dragons in Dresses for the bloody St. Patrick's Day collaboration. Now those aren't my hands.
They're mine.
So over to Martyn. Let's go play.
Hi everyone and welcome once again to the channel. So Lou asked me to join her with this collaboration video for St. Patrick's Day, and we talked briefly and came up with an idea of doing a bit of a mixed multimedia project. So I looked for some files online and came across this rather dapper looking leprechaun. Was quite taken by him, so we figured we'd use him for the project. So he was printed on my Elegoo resin printer. Link to the file I'll make sure I post in the video in the description as well for you all. And then after he was printed and all cleaned up, I sprayed him with a black spray paint from Hobbycraft. It's a new brand of spray paint. I can't recall the name of it. We went to Hobbycraft recently and looking there, we came across it in one of the big display stands, so figured we'd give it a try. And after I'd sprayed him, I sat there and talked with Lou about the paint scheme for him. I couldn't quite get it working in my head, but after looking online and again talking with Lou, I think we kind of came across the idea of what we needed to do to make him pop, so to speak. So yeah, here we are. Now, in honesty, I wish that I probably would have chosen more of a grey primer over black, because there were a lot of lighter colours for the flesh, the beards, even the browns, all the metallics. It took a lot of coverage, a lot of layers to actually paint over the black, but it is what it is. So I started with a nice dark green, and I had to do about 3 layers just to get it nice, neat and crisp. And then I followed through on the boots with a cad brown. Just a basic cad brown, does the job. But I also use that on his cane as well. And again, it took about 3 layers just to make sure he had nice coverage over the black. Now, with the beard and facial hair, I wanted a nice, almost fiery ginger beard. So I started with a base of cad brown and gave it, I think it was just 2 good solid thick layers of cad brown, just to give it a good foundation to build on. So with the skin, with his hands and his face, I had a nice pinky flesh tone paint. The paint is from Games Workshop's range of paints. It's called Cadian Flesh Tone. I've never been one for mixing paints to achieve certain colours. It's not a technique I've really mastered that well, and honestly the ease of use of just buying something that can be so accurate to a nice skin tone is just so easy, if I'm honest. But yeah, I had to go over it quite a number of times. I think I had to give it a good 4 or 5 coats to cover the skin over the black. And his little shirt that he's wearing, it was painted in this yellowy golden colour, a nice ice yellow. But again, it took a good 4 to 5 coats just to get it looking good over the black. And after getting all of those base colours down, I had to spend quite a bit of time just going over certain areas, just making sure that the paint was nice and evenly coated over on top, and just to make sure that I caught any bits I'd missed. So when it came to painting the clovers on the Leprechaun, as well as the buckles on his belts and leather straps and all, here's where I decided to kind of veer a little away from a lot of the images you see of leprechauns. And because it was kind of emblazoned on top of the hat itself, and not like a flower shoved into the hat, I decided to paint it in gold just to make it stand out. It's a nice antique gold, and I use that on the gold coins on the pot. And the same also goes for the 4-leaf clover emblem on the pot of gold itself as well. With the buckles, instead of going for the gold colour, I decided to use a little bit of silver just to try and make it stand out that little bit more, and I think it really did help. And I also used the silver on the side of the cauldrons as well. That antique gold can be quite messy to apply. It's very pigment heavy, and a lot of those buckles were in really awkward positions. So accidents tend to happen while painting. That's one of the reasons why I knew I had to save the actual black for the cauldron for last, because I knew there would be a lot of cleanup. It's amazing what you can learn from experience. And it's right about here where I make the classic mistake of, let's put your hand in front of the thing that you're painting. Now, thankfully, you haven't actually missed too much. Mainly, I'm just going over the model with washes, just to give it a nice dirty, kind of, not grimy, but just a nice dirty effect. But also using shades on the metal parts just to make them more shiny metallic. But this is also where that choppy editing came into place, and a good chunk of it was actually missed out. So after the wash had dried, took about 30-40 minutes to actually fully dry. Here's where I start going over and building up the different tones on the model. Starting with the beard, I got a dark kind of matty orange, and I mixed it with some cad red, primarily going more redder than orange, and then going over it and then doing subsequent layers with just more and more orange as I went. It took about 3 or 4 different go-overs on it, but it's the first time I've actually ever painted ginger hair, and I gotta admit, I really like the end results. It's just a shame I was so focused on what I was painting because I've never painted that colour hair before. Unfortunately, the miniature went out of shot a couple of times. And here's where I decided to tackle the flesh. Nothing fancy, I just went over it with Acadian flesh tone, just avoiding the creases and mainly hitting the parts of the model where the sun doesn't hit it, and just going lighter at the extreme points. And now I'm just going over all the green bits of clothing, mainly with the same green that I first based him in, and then using a lighter green and mixing the two together, just going over the lighter areas just to make the colours stand out a bit more. And it probably took about, I think, 4 or 5 layers of building up just to a lighter tone, just to achieve the result that I wanted to achieve. But as you may have seen previously, I'm also happy kind of like smudging the paint that I applied just to try and get it to blend a little bit better. And you can see here, now that I've started to put on that final layer, just how much it really does help it pop. And another thing to note is that blacky brown wash that I used, it comes across as quite oily as well, so it takes a good number of extra layers just to build up, just to hide that shiny glossy effect that it does give it. Going back to that ice yellow, I didn't really add any other yellows or whites to it to help lift it. It was just very thin down going over that area because there's a lot of folds and whatnot in there, and there was a lot of the wash to actually cover up as well. But just doing so gradually, just building up your layers just to give it that highlight effect using that one colour. Now, for the boots and the shillelagh, I used the same brown. Originally, I was gonna consider using two different browns for the leather on his boots and for the shillelagh itself. But honestly, the mind fills in a lot of gaps when you actually paint miniatures, and although I'm using exactly the same colours, with the way that I'm applying the highlights straight over the cab brown with the wash on the boots, it keeps that leathery effect. And yet I'm using the exact same ingredients on the shillelagh in a few minutes. No change at all, nothing added to it, but the mind see things in a particular way, and you see the shillelagh, you see it's wood, you see the boots, and you see leather boots. It really is miraculous just how the mind fills in all those gaps when you actually paint and look at miniatures. And for the golds and for the silvers or the metallics really, I didn't do any highlighting except for going straight in with just a very light dry brush of silver. It really didn't need anything. That antique gold held all of its colour after the washes. The washes sunk into the recesses, and it really didn't need much else to make it pop. And I also put it around the side of the cauldron, just very careful, very delicately, with next to no paint on there at all, just to give the cauldron a nice scruffed up effect. And finally, it's just finishing up the eyes. I filled in the eyes themselves with just a bit of white, and then there's a technical paint made by Games Workshop. It is very much like a wash, but I don't know how it works. But you paint over white with these certain technical paints, and it gives almost like a glowing effect. You probably don't see that very well on camera, but they're fun paints to use for this sort of thing. Very good for like jewels and emeralds and things like that as well. And there we have it.
Okay, it's over to me. Didn't he do a brilliant job on this leprechaun? He's such a talented boy. So, I have glued this leprechaun onto it's basically like a coaster fail, but I never throw any resin work away. useful for stuff like this. So I've got out some resin dyes. I'm using ruby red and bright red, and I've also got out one of the mica powder reds from Rossiford. And I'm using JDiction UV resin, and these are those little ball if you saw my saw our other collaboration actually with the Xenoduck. Those are like little they're from Temu. They're like marketed as like little bubble things. So I have been struggling all week with having migraines. So I'm only actually contributing a small amount to this video due to having a lot of pain in my neck and my head. So my only contribution to this, and thank you to Martyn so much for helping me, because I really wanted to take part in this collaboration with April from Dragons in Dresses Consortium, because they're always so much fun, you know. So I talked over with Martyn what I kind of envisioned. So all I'm adding to this is the very small part of putting the Leprechaun onto the this coaster that's acting as like a ground. I thought it looked cool because it looks kind of magical, and then adding the bloody gory elements to the base. So that's just so I'm simply doing that, as you can see, with the UV resin. Because of the colour, using the coloured resin, and it's not, obviously it's not specified UV coloured UV resin, so it's going to be a bit harder to cure. I'm not just using my torch for this. I'm just using the torch just to stop the resin basically running around, and then I'm using the lamp in between, and that's what I've just done. So I'm doing it in layers, and as I'm adding to the layers, I'm just added a bit more of that resin dye to the UV resin in the cup, just to give a bit more depth. I don't want to go absolutely crazy with the blood. Now, it's a collaboration for bloody St. Patrick's Day. Now, you know, loads of people have seen the the Leprechaun movies, I'm sure. So what I wanted to create was the idea that nobody gets this particular Leprechaun's gold. And he'll fight you for it. He'll unalive you for it. So that's kind of what I wanted to come up with. I forgot to hit record when I added the beads in with the mica powder. I added in the mica powder, stopped recording for some reason. I think it was just to unpackage it. And then I took a picture. Oh dearie me. So that's what I did. I added the little those little like pearly ball things, because it adds like a really gross like texture ideal to the blood, I think, you know. Like fatty bits. Ew. But it's fun, isn't it? That's the fun of this and being silly. So I've added some of the blood gory bits to just a little part of the hand. I'm not into spoiling anybody's paintwork, especially Martyn's, because this was an absolute, he thoroughly enjoyed painting this. So I obviously wasn't going to do, and I decided I didn't want to do any splattering of the sort. This Leprechaun's an absolute machine. He knows what he's doing. If anyone comes near his gold. So all I've done is added to the model, where you can see here some coming off his hand there, And then I've added a few little drops just coming off the edge of his boot, and then as if it's trailed down through, you know, into the coins and dripping off the sides, which is very, very cool in my opinion. And I'm just leaving the torch there to allow for some drips, because I wanted it to appear that the blood is fresh and dripping off the bottom of his foot, because this leprechaun, like I said, he's an utter machine. Nobody gets to his gold at the end of this rainbow. So yeah, so that's my contribution. Martyn is gonna do the next segment, which I originally was gonna be doing. He's gonna have a go at doing a little bit of sculpting, and that's really awesome, I think. So I'm happy with this bit. Let's have a little look-see. So lovely and nice and bloody there. But as I say, because I've had a baddie week with my baddie neck and head, Martyn's going to take over the next spot for me. So back over to him.
And welcome back to the part of the channel where myself and my ever-rising blood pressure have to deal with my social anxiety. And as Lou had mentioned, she wasn't up to the task of actually doing this bit of the video, so I offered to step in. I know originally she had just planned for just to do an arm and a leg, but I kind of decided I wanted to go all in. I've never actually used clay before. The closest I've come to using clay would have been messing with the kids' Play-Doh back when they were kids. But I've been following a lot of other YouTubers who use clay as their main medium, and I don't know, I've always wanted to give it a bit of a go, so here was my opportunity. But to go back to what I was first saying, like I said, I'd never done clay before, and I just wanted to give it a good go and decided I wanted to try and get a whole body, although I like the idea of having his head caved in till there was nothing left. But as you can see from when I actually measured him up after making him, I kind of realised he was a little bit on the chunky side. So I cut off an arm and a leg, which I realised now it was a great opportunity to do a joke of what did it cost me? An arm and a leg. Hey ho. But I decided just to try and go for broke with these two. Get a nice little bit of gore going for the bloody St. Patrick's Day. Now, originally I was gonna do fingers on the hand, and as I was looking at it, and because I was kind of short on time, instead of doing fingers on the hand, I just decided to do a mitten, and just to go for broke with that. Now, like I said, I've never messed with clay before, and I mean that wholeheartedly. I've never actually touched the stuff. So the whole process of getting the armature going, wrapping it in foil, then getting the clay on top. The hindsight thing now comes where I didn't need the foil. He was quite a chunky lad in the end, wasn't he? But it's a learning experience. As they say, you learn something new every single day. And it's just best to plod on, really. So what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to get the joint that's... I'm trying to get the sorry for stuttering. I'm trying to get the joints that would be attached to the limbs. I want to have a little bit of gore and a bit of bone protruding. And this bit, at the moment, I'm just trying to make a bit of a rim for a sleeve before I attach the glove. Now, like I said, a couple of times now. I've never dealt with clay. I've always known you've got to be delicate to handle, but the amount of times I had to re-go over trying to clean off the pieces to remove any sort of fingerprints or any fresh indents I've made. It was a good number of times. Takes some getting used to, that's for sure. But the end result I'm actually quite happy with. Much chunkier than I actually thought he would be. And I know leprechauns are meant to be like on the shorter side. I've got no problem with the height, but it was the width of the man. That's what made it impressive. And all I'm doing right now, I'm just trying to make the base for a foot. It's interesting the things that you learn, the techniques that you can learn when trying to start a new medium. Very fiddly and didn't quite turn out how I'd hoped, but I'm happy enough with it, if I'm honest, especially for the first try. You can't expect perfection, you can only wish for it. So now I'm mainly just smoothing her off. I'm happy with pretty much with how it's progressing. Most of it's done. And all that's really left to do at the moment is just some of the more fiddly parts. So as you can see, the hand's done along with the mitten. Now I'm just finishing off the foot that's to go round the bottom of the leg. Apparently I'm forgetting the names of the parts of the body. And then just neaten her all off before I paint her up. And I'll get back to you in a mo. So by here, I'm just trying to cap off the joints of the limbs. I've already part prodded inside, as you can see what I'm doing now, just to kind of get the effects of going of the sinew and all that inside the leg and arm. And I've attached pieces for the bone. And then off camera, I gave her a quick spray and a quick base coat. And now I'm going to go over them with some washes just to try and blend some colours together, just to try and get that fleshy effect on the inside, and just to get a bit of dirt and grime on the clothes and get some shadows going inside the crevices. And as you can see now, the washes have dried. I did go over them once again with just a little bit of the base colours, just to try and get rid of the excess washes. Dab some glue down, get them stuck on, and what I'm about to do next is just to get a bit of Uhu glue, mix it with a bit of red acrylic. I'm just to try and get some of the blood to try and drip down from the limb right to where the blood has been placed on the base of the model. I decided in the end just to go with the leg as well. If to fit the arm on, it would have just been too busy. I can always keep it for a future project. I like the idea of possibly keeping it for like a dismembered Santa Claus, the arm that is. But that's for another day. So all I'm doing here is I'm just going over where I placed the Uhu glue, just to try and get it to stick down. I know you can't see it too well on camera. And then I'm just placing dabs of it. Gory splatter effect, if words will actually work. And I go over it once more with a specific like red wash that's made from Games Workshop. It's called Blood for the Blood God. It's a brilliant little paint, and all you do is just whack it down, let it dry, and it comes out as pretty good fresh blood. And as I finish up the last of the Blood for the Blood God on the model, I will hand you over to Lula, and I'll see you all next time. Have a good day.
Thank you, Martyn. Didn't he do awesome? This is just great. So stay away from leprechauns. They are very, very possessive of their gold. You know, they'll literally rip you to pieces. I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope you're inspired. I hope you've had a giggle. And I'll see you next time. Love you, and stay very, very weird.
In a room full of colors and swirls, Nerd Goblin art draws a magic world, with foxes that prance and badgers that dance, a whirlwind of dreams with a single glance. Gerald the alligator grins so wide, in enchanted waters he loves to hide. Dragons breathe wonder with flames so bright, each creature born from a magic night. Nerd Goblin paints life in every brush, animals frolic in a vibrant rush, from canvases to tales